Here's something that'll blow your mind. While we think of World War II as a clear moral battle between good and evil, major American companies were actively profiting from both sides, with investments of $800 million in Nazi Germany.
That's a pretty shocking claim. What evidence supports this?
Well, let's look at the numbers. Companies like Standard Oil invested $120 million, General Motors put in $35 million, and ITT invested $30 million. But here's what's really wild. Standard Oil was actually fueling German submarines in the Canary Islands that would then turn around and sink American ships.
Hmm. But wasn't there some kind of regulation against this kind of activity?
You'd think so, right? They even passed the Trading with the Enemy Act. But here's where it gets interesting. Not only did these companies avoid punishment, some actually received compensation from the US government for their factories damaged by Allied bombing.
So what exactly were these companies providing to Nazi Germany?
Oh, you're going to love this. Ford's European factories supplied Hitler with 65,000 trucks in 1940 alone. General Motors was manufacturing 80% of medium trucks and 70% of heavy trucks in the Third Reich. Their Opel division was even making 50% of all engines for the Junkers 88 bombers.
That's quite different from what we usually hear about American involvement in World War II. What about the famous Lend-lease program?
Well, that's another fascinating piece of this puzzle. While we often hear that Lend-lease was crucial for Soviet victory, only about 4% of what the Soviet Union produced between 1941 and 1945 came from overseas. And here's the kicker. 86% of that aid arrived after the Battle of Kursk, when the Soviets had already turned the tide of war.
Let's pause for a moment and think about this. What do you think would have happened if these companies hadn't supported Nazi Germany?
That's such an important question. Without American corporate support, the German military machine would have been severely handicapped. Just imagine no trucks for transport, no advanced communications equipment, limited oil supplies. The war might have ended much sooner.
How did this affect the actual fighting on the ground?
The impact was huge. ITT and General Electric were supplying radio and electrical equipment that gave the German army a significant communications advantage over the Red Army in 1941 and 1942. Even the famous Messerschmitt 262, the world's first jet fighter, was powered by General Motors engines.
So what lessons can we draw from this for today's world?
Well, it really shows how economic interests can override national security concerns, even during times of war. Think about it. These companies were literally profiting from both sides of the conflict. And you know what's fascinating? This pattern hasn't really changed much in modern times.
That's a sobering thought for current international relations.
Exactly. And here's our final question to think about. How different is today's global business environment from what we've discussed? Are we seeing similar patterns in current international conflicts?
Those are some challenging questions to wrestle with.
Indeed they are, and I think that's why this history is so relevant today. When we look at current global tensions and international business relationships, we need to remember these historical lessons. The same kinds of conflicts between profit motives and national interests are still very much with us.